Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Insight into Law. Hopefully, you've all been able to log on successfully. It's lovely to have so many of you with us tonight. For those of you who don't know me, I'm sure the majority of you do. I'm Camilla Hannon, and I'm Head of Careers at Manchester High School for Girls. And this is one of a series of talks that we arranged during the school year on different careers areas. So we're very fortunate in being able to call upon our alumni and other friends and guests of the school. And tonight's no exception. So we've got 4 guest speakers tonight who I will talk about in due course. I'm just going to briefly run through the order of events tonight. And then I will welcome our speakers. So first of all, we've got Joy Kingsley, who's going to speak first, and she is an alumna from 1974. I'm just having some problems here. Okay. So our first speaker is going to be Joy Kingsley, who is an alumna, class of 1974, and she's now a senior partner at JMW. She will be followed by Marissa Oluwadare, who left in 2018 and is now studying at Nottingham University. She'll be followed by Amy Stout, who left in 2007 and is now a barrister specialising in family law. And our final speaker will be Sally Penny, MBE, who is a barrister at Kenworthy's Chambers. And our speakers will come in order, and then towards the end I'll be talking a little bit about some routes into law as a career, a couple of university courses. Hopefully towards the end we should have some time for some questions. If you do have a question that you want to ask, then write your question in the chat section to the right of your screen. We do plan to finish promptly at 8 o'clock, but if we do have time, I will pick out some questions and direct them to the most appropriate person to answer them. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Joy, who is a senior partner at JMW Solicitors, and she's going to talk a little bit about her career path to date. Over to you, Joy.
Good evening, everybody. Nice to hear that a number of you have joined from many different schools. I'm, as well as being an alumna of Manchester High, have been a governor at Manchester Grammar for about 15 years, and within the last year became a governor at Manchester High as well. I think my late arrival into notoriety at Manchester High is probably because I was relatively notorious when I was there, and not perhaps for all the right reasons. So for any parents listening, if you have some frustrations with your daughters or even your sons at present, sometimes we turn out okay, even if at school we've not always been the best behaved. So I myself I was there from literally the prep school aged 5 right the way through to being 18 when I went to Nottingham University to read law. I was asked about what my A-levels were. I can still remember I did history, German and Latin as my A-levels. There aren't really the right A-levels to do law. You can do science A-levels, you can do arts A-levels. Oddly enough, what the universities don't generally like so much, maybe doing law on its own, but there's plenty of things that you can do. I've known people do music and still go ahead and study law. Another one that I'm often asked about for people applying to university is, are you better to do a law degree or should you do some other type of degree and go on to take the exams that are necessary either to become a solicitor or a barrister thereafter? One thing that I would say is it's a year more expensive by quite some way not to do a law degree, because you have to do a GDL qualification followed by an LPC, which takes 2 years between the two, whereas if you've got a law degree you just do an LPC. We've just actually done our trainee recruitment for 2 years hence. I read all 350 applications. And two things I should say straight away about that is that you should really aim for a 2-1 or above. I know that you'll always hear that from various people along your education, but as somebody that recruits trainees to my current firm, JMW, we really don't have time to look at people who have degrees below that, because we might have 15 places and we've got most of the candidates have got 2-1s and firsts, so it's quite important that when you go to university that is what you aim for. So I left university. I already knew that I wanted to be a solicitor and not a barrister. I'd known that I wanted to do law from being about 16 probably. And that was because my aunt was a JP and I used to watch in court, and I quite imagined myself doing court work. Obviously, I was at school a lot earlier than most of you, particularly the ones that are watching that are still at school now. But at that time, it was quite normal to do a variety of work, not just specialise in one thing, and that actually stood me in good stead when I went into my first job and beyond, because I went to a Manchester firm which was then called Goldberg Blackburn, that became Panoni. I was only at that firm and no other for 30 years, and I went from being a trainee in the firm to being the managing partner of a firm that had 750 people in it, and by then I'd done every single type of legal work, so I was able to manage the firm probably better because of that. So again, one should guard against being too specialised too early. Often trainees come saying that they definitely want to do family work or corporate work, and they choose their firms accordingly, but it's often better to go to a full service firm such as the one that I'm in. And of course I would say that, wouldn't I? But it does mean that you are able to really choose what you want to do when you've got some experience in the legal work. I was, having started as a trainee and then having run a small office for Panoni, I went back into the Manchester office, ran what was called the private client department for a number of years, and then when I was 37 I became managing partner of the firm. It was in a recession, things were not easy, there wasn't a queue for people wanting to do that job. We'd just gone into a merger with a London firm. It hadn't worked well, and initially I was on a board of 5 people, but when we eventually split from the London end, I was then running the firm sort of on my own with a lot of support from a lot of people. And I did that job for 14 years, and during that time the turnover grew from 10 million to 50 million. And then I became senior partner at JMW. I was in my early 50s by then, and really did the same thing all over again, because JMW was a relative, well, it wasn't small, there were 150 people there, but they largely did personal injury and clinical negligence, and the then owner of the firm wanted somebody to make it into a full service firm. So rather than, as it were, live out the next 10 years at my previous firm, I decided to do it all again. And we had about 10 million of turnover when I joined the firm. 3/4 of the people only did personal injury and clinical negligence work. And now we have, between Manchester and London, 560 people, and also this year we'll do the 50 million of turnover that I hoped I might do. Sorry, that was definitely the real rookie mistake of leaving my phone on when I should have switched it off, of course. That was my son, who is ex-MGS, and I know there's people on the actual call that are from MGS as well, and Altering Grammar, where I literally live next door to the girls' grammar, so know quite a few of the schools that are involved here. So my job has been to help build the firm strategically, and that's been business development, incorporating PR, and getting the JMW name in Manchester from a firm that wasn't very well known to a firm that is now pretty well known. And I've been involved in people recruitment, so that, as I said, the firm had gone from 150 to, in Manchester, 500 people in Spinningfields, where we're now situated. And I've been pretty involved in the recruitment of all those people, particularly partners who joined us with good followings of work. And then literally about 18 months ago, we decided we had need for a London office. And most firms, when they open in London, do something quite small, perhaps have serviced offices. But in fact, we decided to do it in the same way as we've done Manchester. We've now been open 18 months and we've already got 80 people in London and another 14 waiting to join us. I've, as you will have gathered, really enjoyed law firm management more than perhaps I enjoyed doing the law in the first place, but a lot of lawyers have a real love of their work type, and I really admire them who really get very involved in cases, really interesting cases. My firm gets involved in some quite well-known cases. We did a case for a long time which was in the news, acting for a lot of Morrison's employees against Morrison's who had leaked their data. That case went on for 4 years and is a salutary lesson to anybody, because we won in every court until we got to the highest court in the land, and then we lost, and that case was done for all those people on what's called no win, no fee, which means that we didn't gain 1 penny out of our representation for 4 years. But equally, luckily, we do quite a lot of cases that we win, and all sorts of different legal work, from corporate work to employment work. So the life of a trainee, I think, is quite exciting for them. They work in many different departments, they get involved in cases, they always like it when we're acting for celebrities. If they walk past well-known footballers sitting in our reception, that's always a good one. And we have a combination of people, but most of our people really like to be out and about, meeting people, gaining work for the firm, and working with other people that they really enjoy working with. So the only thing I would say is, if you do not like reading, don't become a lawyer, because really there is a lot of stuff to read, and sometimes people think it's a sort of glamorous job, but you have to be quite quick at reading it, be good at retaining it, remembering where you've seen things, and those are sort of qualities that some people, even though they're highly intelligent, just don't enjoy reading. So I was probably, I'm down one of those people actually, and in management people know if they send me something that is very, very, very long, I'm much less likely to read it than if I have bullet points, but there we are. So with Manchester High, my firm have been involved in sponsorship of balls and I've had an involvement in various opportunities at the school, and we've offered opportunities to people who look for work experience. Law hasn't been such a popular subject over the last few years, not really sure why, but sometimes literally you only get 6 people now applying to do law, or even less, whereas at one time it was a lot more. I think it started in the last recession really, that people knew people that had lost their jobs, whereas on the medical side that doesn't seem to happen so much, so that may well be why that would be. So I would encourage people to really think about a career in the law. It's not boring. There's many different types of law that you can get involved in, and there's quite a few alumni from Manchester High, Manchester Grammar, lots of other firms, but equally if you're in one of the other schools and you want some work experience, feel free to contact me. My email is on the site, the JW site, but Manchester High also have and the people that have arranged this also have my contact details. So if people are interested at whatever level, we don't actually take work experience under 16 because of confidentiality to do with clients, and I think that clients sometimes are only happy to have somebody sitting in their case if they're slightly older, but above 16 we do some training for those people, but so do lots of other of the Manchester firms, and obviously nationwide also the case. So that's really what I've got to say about my involvement in the law, and I hope that's been helpful. Unfortunately, because I'm suddenly involved in something in London today, which is where I am, I'm not going to be able to stay for questions and answers, but if anybody wants to ask me anything, as I've said, those are my contact details, so feel free to do so. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joy, and I know you're having a very busy day with some unscheduled things coming your way, so thank you very much for joining us and giving us that insight into working as a solicitor and into working in a really large law firm, and like you said, the management part of the work as well, which was very interesting to hear about. Some of the points that Joy made I will pick up later, such as the importance of being willing to do a lot of reading, and the choice of subjects at A-level as well, which I can already see a few questions coming up, and I will address that later. Thanks, Joy, as well for your generous offer of work experience to those who are over 16. I hope you're not deluged, but thank you very much. So our next speaker is Marissa Oliwadari, who left Manchester High just 2 years ago. So Marissa is at the University of Nottingham, and she is at the moment in her final year of studying law. So she's going to give us the perspective of the student perspective, really, of someone who's well advanced into her law degree. So I'm going to hand over to you, Marissa.
Great. Thank you for the introduction, Ms. Tanan. I hope everyone can hear me. Yeah, everyone hear me? Okay, great. Yeah, I'm basically going to be giving you an overview of my experience as a law student, and also my journey into law, covering the subjects that I did at school and also the entire application process. So if you go on to the next slide. Next slide. Okay, great. So yeah, first a little bit about me. Same as Joy, I've been at Man High all my life. I started in the prep school and then went on to the secondary school. And at GCSEs, I did obviously the compulsory subjects, so English language, literature, maths, the sciences, and I chose language as well. I chose to do French. And for my optional subjects, I did religious studies, history, and PE. Now, for A-levels, I will say my GCSE choices definitely influenced what I chose for A-level, because I did history and religious studies again. I really enjoyed doing them at GCSEs, and I wanted to go into more detail in both of those subjects at A-level. I also chose the economics. My reasoning was a bit different. I'd had no previous experience with economics, but I knew that I really liked Miss Chisnell and Mr. Randall, and I wanted both of them to teach me. So that was why I chose that. But luckily it all worked out fine, and I enjoyed all three of my A-levels, and I did quite well in them. As Joy previously said, one of the good things about doing law and choosing to do law at university is that it gives you a lot of flexibility with your A-level choices. Very rarely will you see mandatory requirements from admissions officers saying that you need to study this subject or you need to get your A in this subject. It rarely happens. At most, I noticed when I was applying, that universities might give you very vague preferences that in terms of the subjects they prefer for you to have studied. But again, those are very flexible. So I actually just took this excerpt from my university's admissions page for law applicants, and they said that all A-level subjects in the arts, humanities, sciences and social sciences are acceptable. However, offers are not normally made to students presenting more than one non-traditional subject. And then they listed the non-traditional subjects as being art, drama, IT, graphics and PE. So really everything's on the table. If you really like your sciences, do those. If you like humanities, do those. If you like the arts, you can do them as well, but maybe just keep them to a minimum. And yeah, at the bottom, I've just included some extracurriculars. I did netball, drama, D of E, and personal highlight, I was in the school production of Hairspray. Next slide, please. Okay, yeah. This is just basically a summary of my application experience, what it entailed and what you could expect. So as you can see, in the summer of year 12, this will be after your first year of A-level study. I was busy attending open days and deciding which universities I wanted to apply to. Now, in terms of open days, this is really something you should be doing throughout year 12 anyway. You shouldn't leave it till summer, because then you're forced to cramp in loads of information into just 3 months. And if you spread it out, it makes it much easier for you. I know you guys can't visit the universities because of the circumstances we're in, but year 11s in particular and year 12, keep an eye out for any university virtual open days, because I know they are hosting them. They're really useful for you to get information about universities you're thinking of applying to. And they definitely had a huge impact in where I ended up choosing to apply later on. In September, I wrote my personal statement and I was practicing for the LNAT. By October, I had submitted my applications and completed the LNAT. And several months later, in February and March, I was hearing back from universities with offers and rejections. I'm just going to rewind back to September, because I think that's probably the most significant part for all students that are applying to university, but especially law students. I'm not going to go into too much detail on the personal statement, just because there's so much to say about it and it's unique to each individual. I don't think there's any perfect model personal statement, but and also your schools will give you loads of help with that. But if anyone does have any specific questions, you can put them in the chat box and I'll try to answer them as best as I can at the end of the presentation. I will focus a bit more on the LNAT though, because I think that's a bit more universal. The LNAT basically stands for National Admissions Test for Law. It's a test that's employed by a handful of universities, and it's used to assess your aptitude for the skills required to be a law student. The test comes in 2 parts. There's a multiple choice section at the beginning, and that's based on passages that you'll be given to read. And the second part of the test is an essay section. Now, the LNAT is difficult, and it's designed to be difficult because the universities that use it are really oversubscribed, and they get loads of really high quality applicants like yourselves. And so the LNAT is basically used to help distinguish between applicants and supplement the rest of your application. No one ever gets full marks on it. The multiple choice was out of 42. It still is. Back when I did it in 2017, the average for the year out of 42 was 19. So that was actually less than 50%, you know, of the total marks. So it's designed to be very difficult. All I can advise you to do is practice as much as you can. Start really early if you can. There's loads of resources and books out there, so buy them. Maybe buy one, don't buy all of them, but shop around and see what's available and what suits you. If you're in doubt, the LNAT website actually has resources and tests that you can buy, and also I think there are some free ones as well. Piece of advice, if you can bear it, perhaps don't apply to all LNAT universities. this is just something I'm saying based off hindsight. I think it's quite a risky thing to do because anything can happen when you're doing the test. Anyone can have a bad day, and it would just be such a shame if a poor LNAT mark was to bring down the rest of your overall application. So I would suggest mixing in universities that use the LNAT and universities that don't use the LNAT, because there are so many good universities out there that don't use it. Just a few of them: Leeds, Manchester, Edinburgh, Warwick, York, Exeter, Sheffield. And I literally just snatched that list off the top 20 law schools in the UK. So there are loads of options out there. And yeah, next slide, please. Okay, yeah. So this is the structure of my law course anyway, but I'm pretty sure it's similar across the board for most universities. It is a 3-year course altogether. I'm going to focus primarily on the first year because that's obviously the stage all of you will be closest to. One of the best things about first year is it's only a qualifying year. And by that, I mean, it doesn't contribute to your overall degree classification. Essentially, it's like a practice year for you to get to grips with what you're doing, how you should be learning, the material, etc. So treat it that way. Don't put too much pressure on yourself. Law is a difficult course and there'll be a lot to digest in your first year. Yeah, try and work hard, but if you don't get exceptional results by the end of your first year, it's absolutely not the end of the world. I definitely did not, so don't worry. In terms of the content and the material you'll be working on, in first year, you'll be given core modules to do. And core modules are basically the mandatory subjects that you're going to have to do at some point during your law degree. And there's quite a long list of them, and they'll be spread out across the 3 years. In my first year, my core modules were contract law, law of tort, public law, and legal theory. And I did exams in those in May and June. But like I said, they didn't form part of my degree, so I only had to pass them. Yeah, that's something to say. You do need to pass the year. Even though it doesn't count, you need to pass the year. But that's not a big deal because, of course, you'll pass. It's really quite straightforward. And then second year and third year, there's not much difference from the first year, but they do actually count towards your degree. For me, my final year is more heavily weighted than my second year. But this time round, there's a mixture of core modules and optional modules. So in terms of the optional modules, those are really great because it allows you to sort of explore areas of the law that you have more of an interest in, that you perhaps heard of from your core modules and you wanted to go into more depth for. And that's definitely something to look at as well when you're making your university choices, because optional modules are not the same across the board. Some universities offer more than others. So for Nottingham, that's one of the really great things about Nottingham. I really, really liked the variety of optional modules that they gave. There's modules in loads of different niche areas. So there's definitely something for everyone to do. For me, in my final year, I'm doing modules in consumer and marketing law. I've done human rights modules before. I'm doing company law. I'm doing UK constitutional identity, which is all very political. And so it's interesting and it's something to look at when you're making a decision as to where to apply to. And yeah, same as in your first year, you'll do exams in summer and you'll probably have some in January as well. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, this is basically a generic remake of what my timetable looks like in my first year. I tried to make it as accurate as possible. I didn't have access to my first year timetable, but the amount of contact hours you see here is pretty much exactly how it was for me 2 years ago. As you'll see, there's a mixture of lectures, seminars, and tutorials. I'm not sure if that's the same at every university, but I do think most law courses employ an integrated learning process. So there probably will be a mixture of at least lectures and seminars, if not lectures, seminars, and tutorials. And the difference between the three formats is basically that lectures are really big class groups. So for a lecture, it'll be you alongside the rest of your cohort, and you'll probably be in a really big hall, the size of like your assembly hall, and it'll be one lecturer talking to you, and you'll be there to make notes. There's very little interaction. You're just there to listen to what the lecturer is telling you. Seminars are slightly smaller and they're more interactive. There'll probably be room to discuss and debate issues. You might be asked questions. And then you have tutorials, which are highlighted in red on the timetable. And these are very small sessions. So at my university, tutorial, usually there's about 5 to 7 of us and one tutor. And if not for the pandemic, we'd be in the tutor's very small office, sat around a table and basically leading a discussion on very complex issues in the law. And the tutorials are really great because they allow you to take your learning and understanding further. But that is why it is because of the tutorials that you see so many gaps in the timetable, because the bulk of your study is really expected to be independent. There's so much to cover in the degree that there's just no time for the lecturer to go into the depth that he needs to in the small 50-minute slot that they have. So when you're not having lectures, you're supposed to be reading around the subject, following a reading list, reading case judgments, and preparing answers to questions for your tutorial. So if you go on to the next slide, please. Yeah, this is basically a tutorial example. This is something that I actually had to do just this semester in my trust module. So for each module, I will have about 4 tutorials a semester. And this is my second tutorial for my trust module. And you can see here is the reading list just for the one tutorial. And if you go through, there's loads of different chapters and page specifications and case judgments that we're expected to read or highlight in bold. And then you have further reading from academics and their journals and articles. And I'd say if I needed to guess, make an educated guess, there's around 150 pages worth of reading there. And that's for one tutorial. And that's why there are so many gaps in your timetable, because it takes time to read. And you're probably thinking, oh, 150 pages in 2 weeks, I can manage that easily. But you're forgetting that you have 3 other modules to cover as well, which there are also tutorials, and you'll have more or less the same amount of reading. And you also need to do all of that in the same 2 weeks. So when you come to that realization, all the gaps in the timetable makes a lot of sense, because you're expected to be in the library a lot. And if you don't work well in the library, I don't know, you're just meant to be reading somewhere, whether in the library or at home. But yeah, like Joyce said, if you don't like reading, don't do law, because it's just not something you can avoid. It really isn't. If you're indifferent towards it, you can learn to love it. It does definitely get easier. Your reading can become a bit more targeted. You can become a bit more strategic. And also, as you go through the course and you're choosing optional modules, you'll be studying about things that you actually have an interest in as well. So for me now, when I get a reading list, it sounds really nerdy, but I actually get quite excited because I really enjoy some of the topics that I'm learning about. So the process does get easier. But yeah, reading is part and parcel of being a law student. So you just have to embrace it. And next slide, please. And yeah, this is just the final slide. It's basically, I just wanted to say that it's not all about reading and case judgments and academic stuff. Being a law student is a lot of fun, and you know, you have loads of opportunities and experiences available to you that you should take advantage of. At university, there's loads of societies to get involved in. I just highlighted some of the law-related ones. So there's obviously a law society. Pretty much every university will have a law society. There's a mooting society for those of you who like mock trials. That'd be really good if you want to be barrister. There's pro bono societies and advocate magazines, women in law, BAME in law, just loads of different opportunities. And I would definitely strongly encourage all of you, even if you don't end up doing law later on, to get involved in those societies if you can, because they're open to everyone. And there's loads of different projects you can do, loads of skills you can gain, and just loads of experiences. And seminars as well. The law school will put on loads of seminars for you that don't have to be related to the law. And in going to those seminars, you can again explore areas of interest that might not come up in your syllabus. So this is just a few of the titles that I've had this semester. I've not been to any of these, but I get emails about them regularly. And so yeah, if anything there takes your fancy, cyber operations and armed conflict, the transatlantic data and digital trade standoff between the US, the EU and the UK, yeah, things like that are available to you as well. And the school will bring in experts to talk to you about those things. And then finally, careers. From very early on in the course, if you do end up doing law, you are encouraged to think about careers. You're exposed to law fairs. There are introductions to different law firms, there's introductions to chambers. And obviously there is there's an emphasis on the solicitor and barrister route, because there is just an assumption that if you're doing law, you know, you either want to be a solicitor or a barrister. But of course they do make provisions for those of you who perhaps are thinking of doing other things as well. So don't worry, there's just loads of opportunities for you to think about your career. If you don't want to think about it so early on, you don't have to, you can literally just ignore it. It's all optional, but it's there if you want it. And obviously postgraduate opportunities as well. If you'd like to do a master's and go into academia, they encourage you to think about that. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about going into law and life as a law student. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. And for those of you who do choose to do law in the end, you have some tough 3 years ahead of you, but they'll be very exciting as well. You'll learn a lot about the law, and you'll also learn a lot about yourself. And that's probably the most important thing. So yeah, thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. It found it useful.
Thank you very much, Marissa, for that insight. And I think it's really, really useful to hear from someone who is actually studying law now, especially for those of you in the audience who are in year 11 or year 12 or even in year 13, to hear from someone who's been through the application process, you know, just in the last couple of years, and who can kind of still remember all the details of it, I suppose, as well. So I will pick up on some of those, some of the points that Marissa made, and we'll mention the LNAT a little bit later, and also entry requirements. I can see some questions coming up about that now. But we're going to hear from our next speaker now, who is Amy, who left Manchester High in 2007, and I think I remember teaching you briefly in year 9 maybe, and she's now, and it's making me feel very old, she's now a barrister who's specialising in family law. So I'm going to hand over to Amy now.
Hi everyone, I'm Amy. As Miss Hannon just said, I left Manchester High in 2007. I am a barrister and I specialise in family law. I've been doing that since 2013, so I'm about 7 years into the job, which makes me suddenly not that junior, even though I think of myself as only having started really recently. What I think I'm going to start doing, instead of telling you about my time at school, which I will go into, I think it's probably quite helpful reading some of the comments and the questions that have been put up, that I just start by giving you an explanation as to what a barrister does and how that's different from being a solicitor. The key difference really is that both barristers and solicitors are lawyers, but if you're a barrister, you're a lawyer who specialises generally in advocacy or in cases that go to court. If you're a solicitor, you might well do some advocacy if you do, for instance, criminal law or family law. But as a solicitor, there are loads and loads of other things you can do as well that may well not involve court at all. You may well be doing things that would never get to court, like helping companies write contracts or advising people on how to avoid court, that sort of thing. I didn't go down that path. I have gone down the path of being a barrister because I do really like advocacy and I do really like the court environment. Just to explain a little bit as well about the path to becoming either a barrister or a solicitor. For either a barrister or a solicitor, you have to do a law degree, whether that is in the form of what Marissa's doing, which is an undergraduate degree in law. You spend 3 years, you do your whole time doing law, or whether it's by doing another degree, and then after doing that degree, doing something called the law conversion course. It's also called the GDL, the Graduate Diploma in Law. That's what I did. The way that works is really easy. You do an undergraduate degree in any subject. It could be history like me, it could be maths, it could be science, it could be English, it could be anything. And having done that degree, you can then spend 1 year converting to law. So doing a lot of those things that Marissa was just talking about in terms of the things that you study, but instead of doing it across 3 years, you do really just the core, the foundation elements of it in 1 year. And so having done that, you've got the same qualification as somebody who has done a law degree. But as Joy said, you've basically spent an extra year doing it, and obviously that costs money. But there are advantages and disadvantages to both. Certainly from a career perspective, I don't think it makes very much difference which one you do. If you did a law degree, I don't think it hinders your ability to become a barrister or a solicitor. Equally, if you haven't done a law degree, that doesn't matter either. After doing your law degree or your law conversion course, that's the point where you have to decide. There's a fork in the road, and you have to decide whether you do want to become a barrister or become a solicitor, because at that point you do another year of university where you either do the bar course, a professional training course that teaches you essentially how to be a barrister, or the LPC, which is the solicitor's equivalent. And at that point they split essentially. Having chosen to become either a solicitor or a barrister, having finished all your time at university, there's still more training that you need to do. So if you want to become a barrister, you have to do something called pupillage, which is a year-long apprenticeship essentially, where you go into what are called chambers, which is where barristers generally work from. And for the first 6 months of your pupillage, you're just following other barristers, seeing what type of cases they do, learning from them by just following them. And then for the next 6 months, most of the time, you are doing your own cases, but you're supervised by other barristers. So you're not completely on your own, but you are sent off to court on your own. You are representing clients on your own. You are sort of, for all intents and purposes, doing what a barrister does. It's just under some supervision, so you're still being trained. After that 1 year of pupillage, you are a fully qualified, fully fledged barrister, and you're let out into the world to go and represent clients. If you want to become a solicitor, you have done your law course, you've done your LPC, you've done your year of training, and you then need to get something called a training contract. That's a 2-year training. It's also an apprenticeship in a way. Often in training contracts, you do lots of different areas of law. So going into becoming a solicitor, you don't necessarily have to have chosen what area of law you do, but often you'll be applying to a company that does have a specialisation in, for instance, family law, criminal law, or maybe different types of civil law, commercial law, that sort of thing. And over that 2 years, the idea is that you're exposed to lots of different areas of law. And at the end of the 2 years, you apply to become a solicitor at that firm, and you specialise at that point. I'm not going to say very much more about being a solicitor because I'm not a solicitor. I'm going to talk much more about being a barrister. One of the other questions you have to ask yourself if you're thinking about becoming a barrister is what kind of law do you want to do? And what kind of law you choose actually can have a really, you can have a really different daily experience. So I do family law, and what family law involves is the law essentially in relation to families where there's been breakdowns of relationships. So I could be representing people who are arguing over access to their child, like custody battles, that sort of thing. I could be representing parents who are having the local authority applying to the court to remove their children from them because they've got lots of safeguarding concerns about those children. I could be doing divorce law where people are arguing about the money once they have broken up and are getting divorced. Or I could be doing the law that relates to domestic violence, so injunctions against domestically abusive partners, those sorts of things. There are a few other things that family lawyers do, but those are the core pillars, I would say, of family law. The other main areas of law, I'd say there are 4 that you could look at. There's family law, there's criminal law, which is obviously people who are charged with crimes. There's civil law, which is often the law that relates to money. So that could be, for instance, clinical negligence. If you're suing a doctor and saying they botched the operation and I now have to live with a hand that isn't right and I can't work anymore, I want you to pay for that. Or it could be personal injury. I've crashed my car into yours and my leg is all mangled and I can't work, etc. It could be contract law. I could be saying that I had a contract with Marissa and she broke the contract, so now I'm going to sue her. It could be anything. There's then a 4th area of law, which is commercial law. And that's essentially the law that relates to companies. It's under the umbrella of civil law, but as a barrister, it's quite a different area of law. The reason I'm going into this is because actually the reality of your day is quite different depending on the area of law that you do. In family law and in criminal law, the bread and butter of what you do day in, day out is going to court and representing people. And that involves oral advocacy. So standing in front of a judge and speaking in front of that judge, arguing your client's case at hearings where there might be decisions being made about where people's children live or how much money they're going to get out of their divorce, that sort of thing. If you do civil law or commercial law as a barrister, then you may spend some of your time in court, but you may actually spend a lot of your time sat behind a desk doing paperwork relating to court proceedings. So it's not entirely what you imagine with everybody with their wigs and gowns on going to court and speaking. That can have its real benefits. Lots of people really enjoy that. I didn't enjoy the idea of that. The reason I wanted to be a barrister is that I wanted the real variety of going to court, not sitting at the same desk every day, not going into the same office every day. And I still really enjoy that. Those are things that you don't have to decide until you've studied law. It would be very hard for you to decide them before that because you wouldn't know what that entails. The key way that you can decide that is partly by thinking when you're studying the law, what is it that I like? Am I really into contract law, or actually does that not interest me? Am I finding the criminal cases the sort of things that really interest me? And the other way of doing it is getting lots of work experience. And the way you get work experience is doing something called mini pupilages with barristers, which is where you go along to court with barristers and shadow them. I was able to do mini pupilages actually when I was 16 years old, but that's quite unusual now. Joy was saying in her firm that there are confidentiality reasons why they can't take under 16s. Certainly in my chambers, we find it very hard to give work experience to people who are under 18 because of confidentiality reasons. Often the cases that we're doing are quite gritty. They involve quite adult things. And our clients are often quite vulnerable, and so it's not often appropriate to ask somebody to come along and shadow us who hasn't yet finished school. But that's not to say you can't get work experience when you're at school. It is to say that if you're thinking about doing law, then what you really need to think about is getting that work experience, perhaps when you're at university. It's only when you've stopped being at school and stopped being at university that you realise quite how little time you have, how much you can use those really lovely holidays, the sort of 12 weeks at university that I used to get in the summer, that sort of thing. You can use it if you can to be getting that work experience. And it's a really good idea to get work experience in all different areas of law, because I found I only chose family law having seen family, civil, criminal and commercial law, and decided actually commercial law isn't for me, criminal law isn't for me, family law is. I'd seen it all. I also did work experience both in barristers' firms and in solicitors' firms, just so I could make sure that what I really wanted to do was be a barrister. I'm going to talk a little bit now about my career path, how I came to be a barrister, and my time at Manchester High. So when I was at Manchester High, I started in 2007. I did all my GCSEs. I was a fairly bang average student. I worked quite hard, but wasn't particularly exceptional. One thing I really hated was science and maths, and I remember spending a lot of time studying science and maths. to the detriment of my sort of humanities subjects at GCSE, which meant that when I got to A level and I was able to give them up, I did a lot better. So at A level, I did history, music, religious studies, and English. And I really enjoyed that combination. I found that the knowledge base overlapped. I'd be studying something in history, say about 16th century England. I'd then go and do Shakespeare in English, and what I was studying about 16th century England really helped me to understand the context that Shakespeare was talking about. And I enjoyed the fact that my subjects overlapped. But that was me. When you want to become a lawyer, I think both Joy and actually I think Marissa has said this as well, reading is really important. A lot of people who like reading like doing humanities, but it doesn't really matter. There's no one subject that you should be doing. A lot of people who do the path that I took, which is doing a degree at university that isn't law, and then the law conversion course, a lot of those people do subjects like history and English. But there are barristers and solicitors out there who've done maths and science as well. There's no one subject that you have to do. What I then chose to do at university, though, was history. And what I found I really enjoyed about history was that I had to read lots of documents. I had to analyse those documents and really critically look at what they were saying. And then from that, I had to argue. And all of that is really, really relevant to law. So by the time I'd done my history degree, I was then able to use those skills and transfer very easily into law. I did my undergraduate degree at Leeds, and I did something really unusual in that by the time I was applying to university, I actually knew I wanted to be a barrister, but I chose to do a history degree. And the reason I did that was that I'd been told by people who did law, and I had a relative as well who teaches on a law course, she's a professor of law, that sometimes when people do law degrees, they find some of the subjects quite boring and they've got to study them for the entire year, and there may well be elements of a law course that you don't like land law or contract law or family law. Everyone's different, and you find yourself studying them for a really, really long time. Instead, why not do an undergraduate degree in a subject that you know you really like, you've done at A level, and then go on and do a law conversion course? And I was persuaded by that argument. So I went off and did history at university, and I don't regret it at all. I really, really enjoyed history. I went to Leeds and it was great. It was a lovely city. It was an hour from Manchester. I was far enough away from my parents that they were in a completely different city, but equally it was quite easy to get home. I got a 2-1. I was aiming for a first, because one of the things that I did know about becoming a barrister is that academics matter. And I can see some of the people in the questions have been asking about Russell Group universities and does that matter? What I would say is that there isn't one path that you should take. Sometimes people are put off the idea of becoming a barrister because they think everyone who has become a barrister has to have a top degree from Oxford or Cambridge and then go to Harvard and do all of this shiny, shiny stuff. And that isn't the case. There are loads and loads of barristers out there who haven't taken that path, who've done really different things. But it is right that it's quite competitive. It's quite difficult to become a barrister. It's also quite competitive and quite difficult to become a solicitor as well. Whichever one you choose, it absolutely doesn't hurt to have the best qualifications that you can have. If you mess up your A levels, you don't go to the best university, it doesn't matter. You can do more degrees. You can try and perhaps do a master's at a better university, that sort of thing. But if you think you want to go into law, my biggest piece of advice is to try and do as best as you can academically, to set yourself up so you've got the best chance of trying to get that pupillage or trying to get that training contract. So I did my undergraduate degree at Leeds, and then I chose to do a master's in history. I really liked history, and I actually went to Cambridge, partly because I wanted to go and do the master's course that I did, and partly so that I had the best universities on my CV, essentially. I actually did my master's in early modern history. I specialised in the history of chocolate, which was a lot more interesting than land law, having now studied land law. So I don't regret that at all. I then went back up to Manchester, moved back in with my parents and did the law conversion course. at Manchester Metropolitan University, where I then went and did the bar course as well. During that time that I was at university, as I've said, I was doing lots of work experience. There are things that you can do at university to enhance your CV and take the time when you have it at university. Marissa was talking about some of these things. So for instance, you can do mooting, which is like legal debating. It's very, if you want to be a barrister, then it's really important that you do that sort of thing, because how are you going to persuade somebody that this is the job you want to do if you haven't tried some advocacy in a sort of mock trial environment? One of the things I actually did when I was at Manchester High was a mock trial competition, which was really enjoyable and gave me, I would say, actually quite a realistic insight into what it means to stand up in court. It was in Manchester Crown Court, to stand up in court, argue a case in front of real life judges. I know that was something that was Manchester wide. It wasn't just a Manchester High thing. We were competing against other schools. I think all of the schools that are on this call were doing that. So if you are thinking about a career in law, then that sort of thing is brilliant to get into. And if it's offered by your school, take up the opportunity. Even if it goes badly, you'll learn from it. When I was at university as well, was thinking about pupillage, and I made my applications for pupillage. Actually, when I was doing my law conversion course, you end up having to apply a year in advance. I, at the time, really wanted to practice in Manchester. I wanted to come to the bar in Manchester, stay in the city that I grew up in. But there weren't very many jobs in Manchester at the time being advertised. So I ended up applying both to Manchester and to London. I happened to get a pupillage in London, and I moved here with the intention of moving back to Manchester, but actually I found I really like London. I'm really happy here, and I'm actually intending to stay. So sometimes whatever you might plan doesn't work out, but it can work out for the better in that way. One of the things about pupillage and training contracts that I would say is that the bottleneck in terms of applications is at pupillage and training contracts. There are lots of people out there who do law degrees. There are lots of people out there who do the bar course and the law, the LPC, the solicitor's training course. But where the crunch point is at those pupillage and training contract stage. That's where you really have to make sure that by the time you're applying for them, you've got the best CV that you can. I think for the bar, about a quarter of the people who do the bar course actually end up getting pupillage. It's really very competitive. And so it's important that you think about these things, but absolutely don't feel that if you're in year 9 right now, you have to have set yourself up right now. These are things you can think about at university. They're things you might even think about after university if you had a completely different career before you come to law. That's also fine. There are lots of people who come to the bar from having done something completely different. But it is worth knowing that if it is something you're wanting to go down the road of, it's not necessarily a completely easy road. Finally, I'm just going to have a quick, I've been asked to tell you what my sort of typical day might be as a barrister. And I'm going to give a really annoying answer, which is that there is no typical day, but that's why I like being a barrister. I could be in court on one day representing somebody who's been accused of really awful things and having to do a really gritty case about them seeing their children and having their children removed from them. The next day, I could be doing a case where I have to take my calculator to court and we're arguing about the value of somebody's pension and how much it should be quantified as, that sort of thing. There's real variety in the job that I do. My typical day would be to get to court for 9 o'clock. By the time I've got to court at 9 o'clock, I've probably woken up at 6, had to do all the preparation for my case, either the night before or the morning of the case, reading all the papers, writing a document for the judge, telling the judge what my client's after, preparing the cross-examination that I might have to do that day, whatever it might be. I've got to prepare it before I get to court. So it's a job that really does take over your life a little bit if you do it, which if you enjoy it is great. I then get to court, speak to my client, speak to my opponent. I might actually spend my day negotiating and spending 5 minutes in court. I might spend my day in court doing lots of arguing, lots of different things, but it varies hugely. And that's one of the things I enjoy about it. It can be quite demanding because you don't know what you're doing from one day to the next, but at the same time, it's really rewarding. And it's one of the things I really liked about the idea of going to the bar. So I think I might have used up all my time. And it's probably Sally's turn to speak.
Thank you very much, Amy, especially for kind of explaining so clearly the differences between a barrister and a solicitor, which is a question that's come up a few times already, and also for kind of explaining, how big a part advocacy is of the, the different roles and the different kind of the different areas as well. That was really useful. So thank you very much. I'm going to, there's a few questions which are coming up repeatedly, and before I ask Sally to speak, just very briefly, I'm hoping that that's now kind of, we've answered the questions about subject choices at A-level. There are very few prescribed subjects, if you look at the universities and their entry requirements for law. So, we have sent people to Russell Group unis who've studied maths and sciences. We've also seen people gain places with humanities and languages, both ancient and modern. What I would say is that if you do enjoy reading, you're probably going to want to do at least one humanities subject. So that's my personal view, is that you probably will want to do history or philosophy and ethics or classical civilization or a language or Latin or English literature, one of those subjects. Personally, my feeling is it's very good to have at least one essay subject under your belt. But if you want to combine that with a science or maths, then of course, that's not going to hinder your chances at all. So our last speaker is Sally Penny, who's also a barrister. She's been awarded an MBE. She's a founder member at Women in the Law UK, and she's won many awards. And she's really becoming a champion of kind of equality and diversity in the law, and she's very involved with community initiatives such as the Greater Manchester Law Centre. So we're very grateful for her for taking some time out of her schedule to come and speak to us tonight. So I'll hand over to Sally now.
Super, thanks very much, Camilla. Can you all hear me? Excellent. I'm following instructions from Lex. Now I asked to go last, save the best till last. What a disastrous choice that was. I need to stick to the law, right? I should have gone first. Now they've all said most of the things I want to say, so I want to start from scratch. Firstly, I'd just like to thank you, Manchester High School for Girls, for inviting me to speak this evening and do my part to encourage everybody on this call to come to the bar and enter the legal profession. I know we don't need any more lawyers. We do. We're in COVID. We need people to interpret the statutes, as I do. And we need lots and lots of you to help us with technology and the laws governing Snapchat, which you all waste your lives on, and Instagram and all of those things. So we do need loads of lawyers. And of course, we need lawyers in the traditional areas that Marissa and I specialize in. So firstly, my name is Sally Penny. I've been a barrister for 20 years. I know I don't look it, wonderful. But I was feeling wonderful, so I saw Marissa, who's been a barrister for 7 years. My practice is criminal law and employment law. So that answers the person who was asking the question in the chat about doing 2 areas. I did family law years ago, but I didn't like public law, I'm afraid. Making arrangements for people whose relationships had broken down and were trying to arrange care for their children and arguing over KFC or McDonald's as a meeting point was not for me. I was very good at ancillary relief, the money side of family law, but I was clever enough to say that wasn't for me. So crime and employment, that's what I do. And what I'm going to talk about is my journey. I'm going to follow the brief, and then I'm going to talk generally about what the law has allowed me to do. And I'm talking about that because I am aware of the prestigiousness of certainly Manchester High and the Pankhurst legacy. So I want you all to feel empowered and think about what you can do if you should enter the law or if you don't, to really to coin the phrase deeds, not words, what you can do in the grander scheme of things as a professional. Now, I feel like I'm competing a bit because I watched a medicine video. Crikey, they all had slides. Never mind that. I'm an advocate. I appear in court. That's why I don't do chancery. Chancery people appear in court, but largely they do a lot of prep and paperwork. So I am not an old girl. By that, I'm not an alumni of Manchester High School. For girls, indeed, I'm not even from Manchester. You probably tell by my accent. I grew up down south. I practiced in Manchester. I've been here for about 10 years. And mainly because I married a Cornishman. You need to listen actively to follow this link, right? Cornishman, no link to Manchester, other than the elder brother, came to Manchester University and thought it was the best thing. So having met him at university, where I went to read law, pure law, somehow, after a Pegasus scholarship, I was practicing as a barrister, year out, long story, ended up here, 3 kids later, carry on practicing law. Okay, you all following? Good. All right. I don't want people to fall asleep. If you come to the bar, a lot of your work is going to be keeping the tribunals you are in front of awake, 1. 2, persuading them to accede to the arguments that you've got. Now, I dare say a lot of you, or some of you indeed, might have parents who are barristers or know people in the law and so on. So if I'm saying things you've heard before, so be it. But for those of us who don't, for my own journey, my heritage, I'm British, Black British, but my heritage that both my parents wanted me to be a doctor, and my heritage is Black Ghanaian. So where the law came in, no idea. But suddenly I realized I was actually scared of blood. So I had all the A-levels and I'd worked really hard, but I thought, crikey, if you were university students, I would have sworn there, but I can't. This is being recorded. So I did think, oh, bugger, what am I going to do? And there was no panic. I read some books called, there were books by John Mortimer. And they were about this large white man who drank at lunchtime. He was a barrister. He was called Rumpole of the Bailey. And I read loads of those books. You're all too young to have heard of them, but you can still get them on YouTube, I think, because they were made into programs. And I watched this because we weren't allowed to watch a lot of television, but I read all the books, then watched it, thought that is the man for me. I don't mean to marry. I meant, gosh, I liked the advocacy that he was doing, and he was a criminal barrister. And I always had a sense of fairness and justice, and so I pursued my career. I share that with you because it doesn't matter if you know people in the law or not. Law is one of the few careers that you can study something else, which everybody has alluded to, and convert. So you can study history. Indeed, I wish I'd studied philosophy, and then did a conversion course and started my practice in that journey. So you can do whatever the subject is and convert later. So do not be put off if you're thinking, oh, I like people do maths. I know quite a lot of physicists and they still come to the bar. So when I started, I did loads and loads of work experience because I didn't know anybody. Now, my path wasn't, I knew I wanted to be an advocate and I had that desire. Now, at the end, I'm going to ask a series of questions for you to think about when you're thinking about the law, to bear in mind, aside from whether or not you like reading. But it's really important just to bear it in mind because it's a career for life. It's a vocation. It's not just, do it for a bit. Of course, people leave, but generally, most of us stay in it in the long game. But I did work experience in a high street law firm and I was in conveyancing. Now, I can't see all of you. If this was in a real room, I would get you trying on my wig and gown, and I would ask you to put your hands up if people knew what conveyancing was. So when you all buy a house, well, you don't buy houses, your mums and dads buy houses. There are lawyers who deal with houses. Helpfully, Marissa has highlighted some of the wonderful areas of law you can all go into. There's so many different areas. But conveyancing, in those days, really, I'm sure it's changed, involved looking at deeds from the land registry, that's one aspect, then colouring them in, I'm showing my age, I know, with different pen colours to outline where the land was registered, and so on. So I'm sure you can detect from my tone of my voice that crime was the one for me. Prosecuting and defending people, conveyancing didn't do it. But what I did learn from that work experience, so every experience you have, make sure that you learn something from it, and it will always come back to pay dividends. So don't kind of brush things off in that sense. But the law firm where I did that conveyancing work experience were very sweet to me, because they then introduced me to some other barristers, not in conveyancing, but in other areas. So I did some work experience that way. And then I subsequently did another work experience. My parents were very keen for me to have paid employment, because barristers are self-employed. So we work in chambers, we're self-employed. So if you don't have anything in your diary tomorrow, you don't earn. Solicitors are paid. So it's actually really important. So if you want to earn loads of money, I'm not sure the bar is going to be for you, but there are aspects of the bar, commercial litigation, for instance, in the Chancery bar, where you will earn a proper living. But in a criminal bar, if it's not privately paid crime, that being a kind of defending environmental law, for instance, or indeed certain niches, you're going to be on publicly funded rates, and really you're doing it for the vocation. So it's important. I'm not doing crime for loads of money. That's not where I'm at. But so I did another solicitor's work experience, just to say I didn't rule it out, and my parents were very keen, and so on. And so I worked in this high street firm, and they gave me loads of responsibility. I didn't know what I was doing, from making the coffee to other things. But I was able to use those experiences and examples, even though by then I knew I didn't want to be a solicitor, in interviews that I had. And Marissa said, and she pointed it out, and she's right, the bar is very competitive. The legal profession is very competitive. I don't say that to be negative. I'm very positive. As I said, I want to see you all in the law, because we need more lawyers. But you need things that make you stand out, so that one can say with confidence, when people ask you questions, you can answer. This is my view on X, or this is my experience of Y. Now, I know you're all 14 and upwards, but it's really important not to rule off the work experiences that you have. So that was really, really helpful to me working in that solicitor's firm. But it did cement for me that that was not for me, and I wanted to be in court as an advocate, preparing. Now, the reading point, which wasn't in my preparation, but I'll deal with it now whilst I'm here, is important. There is a lot of reading, but also active listening is a crucial skill. Okay. Now, I'm sure your teachers go on about this, don't they? Inevitably. But just imagine for a moment, you could prepare, as I do. Every case I prepare, and I'll give you a very quick taste later on of my typical day. But actually, when you're in court and you listen to the witnesses, because what you do in your preparation, I teach advocacy. So if some of you become barristers, you'll see me, because I teach advocacy in Manchester and in London. Excellent. I know you're all looking forward to that. Great. And so I've taught most barristers. I'm also a pupil mistress, so it really should be called training supervisor. So that's a person who trains you when you're a pupil. When Marissa explained to you the process to become a barrister, and I've had, I think, about 6 pupils actually. So I do feel those. So I'll meet you again if you apply to my chambers. But it's really important to listen actively to that which is being said, and then you build on it. And quite often when one prepares, you get stuck in a rigid. So flexibility is really important, because I want to just talk to you for a moment about this. When you decide, or if you decide to come to the law, and I will allow plenty of time for questions in a moment, you need to be prepared, not just for the basics, the interviews and so on, but you need to be prepared and be resilient, because there will be failures. If you don't have failures, then good for you. But maybe you don't get the grades that you want to. Maybe things don't go quite according to plan. It is not the end. Pick up, dust off your boots, and march on. Okay? Don't be put off, because there will be. And things will happen that you don't expect. So it's really important to be prepared, but be resilient, and be prepared to be flexible. So you may not start that year, but maybe you take a gap year, or maybe you do something a bit different around. And remember to ask questions, of those you know. Look in your network. I am very keen to get young people to do reverse mentoring and to get out there. Never mind Snapchat, no one knows how it works. Well, you do, obviously, we all need all of you, yes, but no one knows. But I do loads of cases now involving Snapchat, Facebook, Instagram. And I said to you before, we need more lawyers, because we need lawyers who understand the workings of those technology in the context of the law. And let me tell you, some of the judges don't even know what emojis are. Never mind me. You know, we have to try and understand the meaning of one emoji to another in order to understand the meaning between certain messages. You know, in a harassment case, for example, you know, did that emoji actually mean menacing, or was it just an innocence? You know, it sounds very silly, doesn't it? So we need you to come and bring your skills, which are brilliant, to us. And when you do work experience in law firms or chambers, when we're back onto the real world, you know, offer your technological skills to firms as something that might be useful. You know, all firms now are being forced to do some sort of online presence. You might be able to help. That's a skill, nothing to do with your grades. It's about you being you. The other thing I want to talk about the law is about people. Whether I am representing people who've been badly treated by their employers or defending the companies doing the bad treatment, can you believe it? Don't tell anyone. Or indeed whether I'm in court dealing with serious cases, prosecuting or defending. It's about people. So you need to be personable. I don't mean talking a lot or perhaps being in jest, or being funny and loud. No, no. It's about people, and it's being able to understand the different circumstances and difficulties that people face. So if you're somebody who likes people and are actually thinking, oh, I think this could be for me, then the law might well be for you. Now, I said I'll talk about things to think about. So the number one thing to think about is, do you like to study? Now, it's not as long as medicine, so I'm not being anti-medicine just because of my parents, but it's still a longish process, isn't it? Do you like to study? It's not as long, so I'd say it's less than medicine, so come to us. But if you did have an interest in medicine, for example, you could do clinical negligence, or professional negligence work. So it doesn't quite leave you some of those interests. Do you like to argue? Now, I've spoken at a lot of universities, a lot of schools. I remember speaking at an event for Withington High School for girls. This lady came to me afterwards with her daughter, who didn't say a peep, and said, I think my daughter needs to, meet you and come and follow you because she likes arguing. And I said, does your daughter know that? And she said, oh, she really loves arguing. So I said, oh, well, why don't I have a chat without you? Anyway, it turns out the girl liked to do chemistry, and she was interested in, arguing. But when I say arguing, I mean, I don't just mean, can I go out, ask mum and dad, I really need to go to this party. Mum and dad, no, you've got revision or you've got mocks. Storming off in anger. That's not arguing. Are you somebody who likes to, as I did, really think about the way to achieve your goal? Another word might be being manipulative. I can't get my words out there. No, I'm not talking about that. But if you are somebody who'd like to argue a point, then the law could be for you, and negotiate a point and formulate arguments. Now, when you go to university, you get involved in debating. So being able to debate different sides of an argument, and mooting. And so that's something else that could be for you. Think about, do you like to be self-employed? As I say, it's a factor now. I'm encouraging you to join, but being self-employed, just a factor because it affects fees. So if you study philosophy, as I wish I had done, or indeed a different degree as Marissa did, and you do the conversion, that's an extra year, then you go to bar school. So just factor that and have a discussion with your mum and dad. Are you somebody who's interested in justice and fairness and human rights? I'm not talking about Mal Clooney, because lots of people think, oh, Mal Clooney is so glamorous and she's great. Actually, she specializes in human rights, international human rights law. That's a specific area. So if that's you, then come. But if you just care about fairness or housing or injustice, then the law could be for you. Now, do you want to earn loads of money? Now, I'm always a bit ambivalent about this. Yeah, loads of money. Not sure that the law's necessarily for you. What I would say is, you want to earn loads of money, look at the different areas of law. and work out what best suits you. Sometimes the loads of money is actually in arbitration, which doesn't really involve standing up in court, cross-examining and that sort of thing. Okay, do you want to make a difference? I've dealt with that. If you want to make a difference in the world as a general, doesn't matter what area, you might think more about immigration law, housing, some of those kind of social humanities areas. Do you want to have long-term goals? So do you want to be a QC or a judge? Those are long-term goals. In the same way as you might want to become a consultant if you're in the medical profession. But think about the long-term goals and where you are, and have a rough plan of where you might be. Lex is chasing me with a sign up, so my 5 minutes left. I've got so much more to say, crikey. If I was assessing myself as an advocacy speaker, I'd be told off by now. So let me use my last 5 minutes to deal very quickly with a couple of things. Because I'm a lawyer, I'm going to list all the things I do. And I'm doing so that you understand that it doesn't necessarily have to be being a barrister, being a solicitor. There are a variety of other areas of law you could go into. Those are the professional ones that we've talked about. But you could become a clerk in a court where your knowledge is required. You could work in the UN where your knowledge is required. And so we often talk about the obvious professions because that's often where we know, but the law, and indeed the law degree, can allow you to do an awful lot more. So because I'm a lawyer and because of the law, I'm an expert in crime and employment. I've told you that. Because of the law, I teach advocacy to new barristers, as I said, in London, Manchester. Because I'm a lawyer, I set up an organisation called Women in the Law UK because I didn't see enough women around or in the profession, and they weren't really role models. So because of the law, I just set that up, and now we've got 3,000 members. Why not? Because of the law, I set up a podcast called Talking Law. You can listen to it. It's on iTunes and Spotify. It's all free, with legal leaders talking about why they came to the law and their path into the law. And so I did that so that you know, if you're in somewhere where you don't have the opportunity for this wonderful evening, curated by Camilla and Lex and their team, and John and Jill, you can actually listen to that. Because of the law, I sit on several boards, so as a non-executive director, and I bring my legal knowledge to those areas. So, and I sit on a theatre board, a housing board, and a school. And because of the law, I mentor other young people like yourselves, but actually I mentor the Bar Council's leadership program so that we can see more women and minorities and more socially mobile range in the law going up. And because of the law, I appear on the radio. I'm on 5 Live sometimes. I prefer Times Radio because I think it's because nobody listens to that really. It's only got about 25,000 followers, but I suspect the 40k listeners to my podcast are probably the people who get up early enough to listen to me on Times Radio there. So because of the law, there is a whole variety of things that I have done and use my law degree and indeed my path. My typical day consists of this. I have 3 children, 4 if you count my husband. He's not in the law. He's not a stay-at-home husband. They might hear me, so I need to be careful. So my typical day would involve me arriving at court about 9 o'clock. I try and drop my children off, but you need really, I don't want to talk about family life and all of that because you're all too young and you mustn't be thinking about that. You need to focus on your exams. Often in schools, people start saying, how do you manage and juggle? And I say, focus on that. That's a different question. Happy to talk about it. So I would I like my children, so I try and pick them up and drop them at school where I can. But if I'm dealing with a complicated sex case, for example, I can't. Or a data protection case, I can't. So I arrive at court about 9. Good morning to security, this is my local court. Brilliant, grab a coffee, meet my solicitor, go and see the client if I'm defending, if I'm prosecuting, go show my face with my instructing solicitor and go and see the witnesses. And then go into court. This day is depending on the trial. Going to court, the court would normally start at 10:30. The case would involve some legal arguments, so your reading and your skeleton argument, drafting, all that prep night before will now be handy and helpful. Once we've dealt with the legal argument, I'm usually arguing to either have somebody locked up for life or introduce their bad character or some other aspect. We'll start the trial, call witnesses, open witnesses. In a criminal case, of course, this is the typical day in a criminal case. For me, Call witnesses, cross-examine, adduce evidence in chief. Lunchtime, 1 till 2, we have to stop for lunch. Usually I work through it or arrange, piano exam or other things for the children. It's not really sat around just chatting, reading the paper. I used to do the crossword, but I'm old now, so I don't even get time to do that. And thereafter, court will resume at 2:15, and we will carry on to probably about 4:30 or 5 o'clock. I'm very keen to try and sit as long as possible. Once the court finishes for that day, the case will become part heard. I would then dash off, go pick up my children. They're usually the last to be collected, or I have a childminder who picks them up. My husband normally forgets. I mean, I jest with you in that sense, but it is long hours, tea time in my house, and family time thereafter. Once children are in bed, quick hello to husband, chat, then prep for the next day. I'm not very good like Marissa is, getting up early. In lockdown, I'd be trying 5 a.m. starts, but I'm just too knackered, quite frankly. And so that would be a typical day, similar if it was an employment case, but employment case tends to be a less advocacy. There we are. So that is a roundup of me and what I do. I'm happy for you to ask questions of me, not just here, but if there are things that are, burning you thereafter, I'm sure you can find me on Twitter, Instagram. LinkedIn is the one I mainly use. Thank you very much for inviting me. And Jill Hayes, the drama teacher who convinced me to do this, you owe me one. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sally, and I will pass that message on to Jill. There was so much in there. I'm not really sure. Where to start. I just wanted to say I do listen to Times Radio, and I really like it. So you've got a yes from me. For those of you who are maybe in year 10, year 11, there was a lot there, wasn't there? So think about what kind of person you are. Do you like arguing? Not as in arguing with your parents, but debating maybe. Are you a good listener? Do you like studying? Because like Sally says, it is a long path, though not as long as medicine. And so for those of you who live your lives on Snapchat and Instagram, your skills are needed, which I'm sure will be music to your ears for some of you. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to look at a couple of degree courses. And these are just examples, because I know we've had a few questions about, do you have to go to a Russell Group university? Does it matter where you study? And what I would say to that is just do your research. There's lots of information out there on university websites. Have a look at, what their courses are like. Think back to what Marissa said about how courses are made up. Look at what you'll be doing in first year. Look at how they organise, their exams and the percentage that goes on each year. Have a look at the graduate prospects, the employability percentages, and so on for graduates from those universities. Can I have my first slide, Lex? So I picked a couple of courses just to give you an example of just a little contrast, really. There was also a question about studying in Scotland versus studying in England, which I think Amy may have answered. So I picked out Glasgow because it's got quite a kind of rich heritage and a tradition of teaching law. I think the law faculty was founded way back in the 15th century or something. But if you want to study in Scotland, and lots of people do, you can study. You can study. There are different degrees. You can study Scottish law, but you can also study English law as well. So you can study English law and then qualify to work in England, even if you go to a Scottish uni. So you have that option. So just some little facts about this degree. The entry requirements are 3 A's, which is fairly standard for law. Give or take a grade there or here or there. For Glasgow, you do need to take the LNAT, which Marissa spoke a little bit about. And I know we've had a question about the LNAT, which Marissa might want to come back to. What I would say is There's not a lot of practice papers available, but if you go on the website or the lawyer portal, which is a really useful resource if you're interested in law, you'll find information there about the LNAT, and you should be able to do some practice, though not a great deal. There's definitely some there. The universities will use it differently. They don't all ask for it. Glasgow does, and about 8 of the universities. But I think Marissa made a really good point in that don't put all your eggs in one basket. Don't apply to 5 universities that ask for the LNAT. Maybe apply for 2 or 3, and then another couple which don't. So Glasgow, it's got a very interesting section on its website about law. It's a department with a very international outlook. Students get access to all sorts of internships over the summer. There's opportunities to moot, to debate. It has the option of study abroad placements in the 3rd year, and there's the option to combine law with other subjects, particularly languages, French, German, Italian or Spanish, if you're a linguist and you want to keep that thread going as well. Like I said, they offer Scottish law and common law, and they also, if you've graduated already in a in a different subject like history, there's a kind of fast-track law degree for graduates as well. If you're interested in statistics, it was ranked 2nd in the UK last year, and it's in the top 1% of universities worldwide. So that's Glasgow. Quite a tradition. I would say that's quite a traditional law degree, but like I said, there's lots on there to look. And someone else had asked, I think, about when you should start researching universities. I mean, there's nothing to stop you looking at universities whenever you want, but I would say probably end of year 11, after your GCSEs, focus on your GCSEs first, and definitely in year 12 is when you need to be starting to do your research, really. It's not just about the course, you need to think about the place as well. Can I have the next slide, please? So I've gone for two northern universities, well, a Northern England university and a Scottish university. So I picked Lancaster for my second university. Lancaster has really soared in the league tables over the last few years, for generally, but for law as well. It's now ranked 1st in the UK in terms of graduate prospects for law, according to the Complete University Guide 2021, which is my Bible. It boasts a purpose-built mock courtroom, which I thought was rather nice. That really drew me in. I don't know whether that's the one in the picture. It has slightly lower entry requirements, AAB, so a little more generous. It doesn't require the LNAT, so your personal statement will be really important for Lancaster and your predicted grades. It also offers a study abroad year. And what I liked about Lancaster, and what I thought looked a little bit different, was that there was a really strong emphasis on practical experience, and there were lots of opportunities for students to get involved in projects that kind of benefited the local community. So, 2nd and 3rd year students were able to sign up to projects where they could, give advice. Give advice to people who needed it for free, and I thought that was really worthwhile, and something which is going to benefit them enormously as well. So in terms of the law degree there, you can specialise from the 2nd year and choose to study commercial law, human rights law, or criminal law in a little bit more depth, as well as the compulsory modules. And there are also reserved work experience placements for their students as well, which is obviously really important. There are a few questions about work experience I noticed coming up on the chat. So what I would say is, if you're in year 9 or year 10, I wouldn't worry too much about that yet. You can certainly kind of make a mental note of any contacts you've got, or contacts that your parents have, but it will be a lot easier for you once you're 16. So I wouldn't be stressing, because a lot of people come and see me and they're in year 9 or year 10 and they're stressing about work experience. I think that's a little bit early. And I also think it's quite hard to get work experience even through a personal contact when you're under 16. There is plenty of time ahead, as our speakers have said. You know, you've got that long holiday after your GCSEs. You've got, you know, your A-level years, and you've got your university years as well. The other degree at Lancaster that I thought was interesting is that you can combine law with criminology, and that looked like an interesting course. So 2 contrasting courses, but there are lots and lots of universities out there with excellent degrees, and I don't want to be drawn into saying that, you know, any particular university is better than any others. I think the experience is very much what you make of it, and where your degree is from is just part of your profile, and hopefully, you know, you've built up you know, a portfolio of work experience and skills that you've gained through extracurricular activities. It's not just the degree that you do in the university that you've been to. So do your research and make your decisions, but don't obsess too much about whether this university is better than the other. Can I have my next slide, please? My last slide. Okay, so things that you can do now. So I've talked a little bit about work experience. At the moment, it's going to be difficult for anyone because of COVID, but hopefully things will open up next spring. Let's hope. This is the same for everyone. You know, for those of you thinking about medicine or dentistry, it's problematic at the moment, but it is the same for everyone. If you're in the sixth form now, and you're pretty committed to applying for law, I would do some reading. We've heard a lot about reading, but I would go on to some of those university websites. They don't even have to be unis that you're interested in, and find some interesting books to read from their undergraduate reading lists. I know there's a really interesting one that I read a couple of years ago, and it was something about, I think it was called Eve Was Framed, and it was about how, someone's nodding, I think about how the law treat, you know, gender and the law, how women can be treated differently, you know, by the law and justice. It's a really, really interesting book. So, you know, you don't have to read the whole list, dip into it, something that grabs your attention, do some reading. It will be really useful when you come to write your personal statement. If you're currently in year 11, you might want to think about doing your extended project qualification on something law related. There's lots and lots of things you can do. And again, that's something that will be useful when you come to apply. If you're younger and you're in year 9, year 10, we've talked a lot about arguing and debating. There's plenty of opportunities in school for doing that. It doesn't matter what the topic is. But it's about getting used to, it's about refining those skills, isn't it? And getting confident about standing up and using, using words, using arguments. Work on your research and presentation skills. Again, lots of opportunities in your school subjects to do that for those of you who are in year 9. Especially humanities subjects, but all subjects really. And if you're interested, we've had a few questions about politics, I think, in the chat. Law and politics, there's clearly a relationship there, but also social issues as well. Keep reading up on what's in the news, all right, current affairs, anything that's related to the law, to justice, to injustice, to social justice. Lots and lots of really, interesting current issues that are related. I think that brings me to the end of what I wanted to say. There was a question about the LNAT. I hope I've answered that. I'll just say again that the lawyer portal is a really, really useful website. If you're in year 11 or above, I would have a look at that. And there's information about the LNAT on there. If you're in year 11, work hard, get good GCSEs. If you're doing your A-levels, the same. Like we've said several times, it doesn't really matter what subjects you've studied. It doesn't matter too much, but it does matter that you get good grades, all right, because of the university's entry requirements. Right, I think we've got about 15 minutes or so, and I know that some of the questions have been answered on the chat already. I'm just going to scroll through and pick out a few that will be interesting. And there was one that I was looking for. Gosh, a lot have been answered already. Yes, right, someone's asked a question here about the SQE, which is the new qualification, which I believe is being phased in, I think, for next September. And Amy and Sally, you're both nodding. I wonder whether, Sally, would you like to say something about that?
I'm going to defer. If I was a QC, I'd say I'm deferring to my junior, which is a really pompous way of saying Amy probably knows more than I do about the SQE. But it's a new qualification coming in. It was controversial because people worry the solicitors would lose out, if you like. But Amy, I don't know if you can answer that a bit more than I can. There's lots of info because we're barristers. Really, yeah. Solicitors are our clients, so we try and keep up with what's going on by way of new routes into the profession. But that's my understanding. So you don't have to do the formal training with the length, as it were. So it's a bit more of an apprentice. And let's not forget, there are firms like DWF who do legal apprenticeships. So they're not formal routes as we've talked about this evening. Amy, I don't know if you've got anything to add, or indeed Marissa, I don't know. They're a bit younger than me, so.
I should have actually said earlier when I was talking about the LPC as a route that you go down to become a solicitor. That's what it used to be. And whoever asked that question was quite right to do so, because it's changed slightly when you become a solicitor. Because I'm not a solicitor, I don't know the answer properly. If Joy was still here, I'm sure she'd be able to answer this really well. But I think the big difference between what used to be the case and what the SQE is that you no longer have to have a law degree to become a solicitor. You can just have relevant experience. That isn't just work experience like in your summer holidays going off and looking at a solicitor's firm. It's working in a solicitor's firm, as I understand it. But it does mean if you were thinking, actually, I want to be a lawyer, but I don't necessarily want to go to university, there are other routes to it. It hasn't yet come in, so what I can't help you with is whether or not, for instance, not doing a law degree would impact on your career prospects if you wanted to be a certain type of solicitor. That's something you would really need to ask a solicitor about, and probably ask a solicitor about in a few years' time rather than now.
Thank you both. I'll just pick up briefly on, I can't actually find the question, but I know it was about degree apprenticeships in law. So, oh yes, it is here. There are degree apprenticeships now in law. There's not a huge number. I would say there's maybe about 20 law firms who are offering them in conjunction with a university. You will need to have done A-levels, and it will take you 6 years to complete the degree apprenticeship. In terms of the process of application, I think you have to apply directly to the law firm, and then if they accept you, you will then apply to the university. These are relatively new, which is why we don't have as much information as we would maybe like. I would say in terms of the benefits or disadvantages, the benefits are obviously that you don't have to pay your student tuition fees. those are paid for you. The disadvantages, I suppose, and the other advantages that you obviously, you acquire a great deal of work experience that otherwise you would have to kind of source yourself. In terms of the disadvantages, I suppose the process is it's maybe a little longer, but maybe not very much. And depending on the degree apprenticeship, you may be tied to work for that particular law firm, or you'll maybe end up specialising earlier than you would have done. I think it's something that I suppose you're learning on the job. You're not going to have to pay out to the uni, but you have less choice about where you go, because if you take a degree apprenticeship with a particular firm, they will have an arrangement with the university, so you don't get to go and study, wherever you want. It's about weighing up the pros and cons. Of course, you can hedge your bets and apply for those and for a traditional law degree through UCAS. So I think my answer to that question is that it's a fairly new thing. There probably aren't many people yet who have come out the other end. So it might be perceived as a slightly more risky option. But do your research. That's all I can say. Do your research and talk to advisors at school. See if you can find anyone who's going down that route at the moment. Okay, I'm just looking at other questions. So we've got one here about how do training contracts work. Sally, would you like to answer that?
Have I muted? Oh. Hello? Yes, thank you. Sorry, I was just typing the answer to that, actually, Camilla. Well spotted. I was going through to see what hadn't been answered. So training contracts. So Amy, very helpfully, I kept saying Marissa when I meant Amy, because of course Marissa's still studying, highlighted to you how pupillage works and a bit about solicitors. So training contracts, you have to apply for a training contract. It's usually in advance of when you would start. So when you get later down the line, universities can help you with that. But training contracts are 2 years, so they're 24 months, not the 12 months you would spend with us as barristers. Another good reason to become a barrister. I'm being slightly biased here, but so 24 months or 2 years, and you change seats. So seats are the different specialisms. So you might start in, for instance, family law with somebody like Joy. I don't know if Joy is a trainer, actually. I know Joy well, but I don't know that she is. And then you would go to commercial litigation after. So it's broken up basically to every 6 months. It used to be 4-month sessions, so you rotate, and the idea is you delve, as we would say at the bar, but you do work and you're trained in those areas, and then you choose at the end where you want to be. Whereas at the bar, what used to happen is nowadays, actually, I did a common law pupillage, which was similarly like that. You did different areas, and at the end of it, you were offered a pupillage in one area. These days, the bar is very specialist now. And even with solicitors, they can offer you a training contract, but say, ultimately, the training contract is going to be in family, or the training contract is going to be in personal injury. And so, but you've still got to do the training, and the idea is you learn the different areas on the job. And so once you finish, you become a qualified solicitor, and you'd be referred to as newly qualified. And then, ideally, you would stay with our firm because they've trained you, and that becomes kind of your firm for life, really. But if it's not quite what you want, you can always leave. Just whilst I have the floor, every day is a different case for all of us. Amy was right about the lack of typical day in the law. And sometimes when you look up lawyer, you get the impression that it's all old men in wigs. And it's a bit outdated, don't you? I mean, a lot of those are actually my friends, so we ought to stick up for them. But it's not. There are still lots of traditions, like going to mess or dining, a lot of formalities. But the bar really and the legal profession has worked very hard to be representative and inclusive of all. So the person who's asking about discrimination against as the private schools, do not be thinking about that. Think about your ability and what you can offer. And when you see those pictures of the outdated stuff, ignore it. I have become a bencher of Gray's Inn. So barristers have to be a member of one of 4 inns. I'm under 50. Most of the people who are benchers won't look like me. And my title will be, whenever I'm in London in the inn, I'll be called Master Penny. Can you believe that? That sounds outdated, but clearly looking at me, I am not. So I really want you all to be encouraged. You know, 20 years ago, I didn't have the opportunity for these types of webinars where you've got Marissa studying, you've got Amy who's practicing, Joy who's been doing it for a long time, don't tell her, and sort of me to ask questions, and of course Camilla who's able to speak to you about the university process. So I hope that's answered the original question about the training contract and a little bit more there. Sorry to steal a bit of that time, Camilla.
That's absolutely fine, Sally. You're welcome. I'm just going to direct this question about the LNAT to Marissa. So Marissa, there was a question about preparing for the LNAT. Is there anything specific you can remember that you did or that you didn't do?
Can you hear me okay? Okay. Yeah, well, for the LNAT, I think it's similar to what I said before. You just need to practice as much as you can and practice for both sections. If you go on Google and type in best LNAT resources, you'll find forums of students discussing the books that they've bought, and you can go on Amazon and you can look at the contents pages and see if it suits what you're looking for, and, you know, obviously buy accordingly. They're not particularly expensive. When you do eventually find a resource and you've settled on it, practice very regularly, very frequently. Try and time yourself if possible. Get used to the way the paper is asking you to think and the way it wants you to answer questions. I would say also spend more time looking at the multiple choice section of the LNAT, just because that'll be what most of the unis who use the LNAT will actually look at. It's the easiest thing to do. The number is automatically generated, and it's the easiest way they can distinguish you from other candidates. The essay, that's a bit more difficult because obviously it will need to be gone through and it will need to be marked according to the university standards. And I know for a fact that not all universities that use the LNAT actually look at your essay. Most of them will actually just look at the multiple choice. There are some universities, namely Oxford and UCL, they specify that they actually do weight the essay. So that's something to keep in mind. But it's more important, in my opinion, that you really try your best to get above the average for the multiple choice section. There's no pass mark. I think someone was asking about a pass mark before. There is none. It just depends on how you do compared to the rest of your cohort. So that's all there is to it. If you're getting above the average, you're in a better position. So yeah.
Thank you, Marissa. That was really useful. I actually didn't know that about the essay, so thank you. That's very interesting. When Marissa was talking about the multiple choice, those are kind of argumentative passages of text which you have to answer multiple choice questions on, and it's tough, and it's also against time, I think, so that it's quite time pressured from what I've seen before. So I think I'm going to draw things to a close. I think most of the questions on the chat have actually been answered either live or by some of our guests messaging answers, so thank you very much to them. If anyone feels that their question hasn't been answered, then please do email your question to development, and I will try and answer, or I will direct it to someone who can answer. So I'm just going to finish by thanking our guests. So Joy, who had to rush off, who spoke first, Marissa, Amy and Sally, and thank you for taking time out of your your day at a very busy time of the year and talking to us. It's been hugely informative. It's been really inspiring, and I know I've learned a lot, and I'm sure everyone in the audience has. So thank you very, very much. We really do appreciate you coming to talk this evening. Thank you. And all that's left to say really is that thank you for everyone who's attended tonight, and please keep a lookout for our next Insight talks. There'll be some more in 2021. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a good evening.